Yeah.
Hey, we wanted to talk also. Let's move into the subject of back into the wrestling arena,
Yes. Yes.
to the professional wrestling arena. The topic we talked about, me and Drew did talk about the murder of Bruiser Brody and Tony Atlas being the hero on the scene, right, to render as much help as he could from the position he was in to Bruiser Brody, and also was from what he had quoted was the only friend in the room he had at that time.
Yeah.
Uh, so we start talking about the dark side of wrestling, and there's a lot of information out there about some of the darker things that go on in professional wrestling with some of the athletes. And we were talking about Bret the Hitman Hart, baby, Bret Hart, and some of the dark things that he went through, or some of the things that he did go through while under that umbrella of professional wrestling. And of course, Colombo got it all right here. So we're gonna let Colombo kick it off as we continue to go into the history and to the lives of some of these professional wrestlers who we all grew up admiring. Junkyard Dog, Bret the Hitman Hart, Tony Atlas, uh, who else? All of them, y'all know Andre the Giant. The list goes on. Devon Erickson. These were popular in urban and all throughout. We all
Yeah.
know these characters, right? But many of us don't know them like Drew, like Drew Danger. Drew Danger's this fella
Well,
right
Brett was probably my favorite. I would say Brett, Shawn Michaels, and Sting were like my top three. And then my four was Booker T.
there. All right, Booker T.
I
Okay.
love Booker T. So it was like those were my guys. So like I always followed them the most. But Brett, I felt so bad for because he comes from a wrestling family. His father was a catch as can actual real shooter grappler
Right.
that took on professional wrestling much later. But his deal was if you're going to learn professional wrestling from Stu Hart, you had to learn how to shoot first, was
Right.
his rule. So he beat the mess out of people. He was choking out guys at 80 something years old that were twice as young and twice as big.
Yeah.
And he would put holds on him. He'd be like, you put your hand over here and you choke it over there. And the blood starts to go to the head and it start to choke out. You could see videos of him doing that. He was known for that.
Yeah.
And he was respected for that. His father was supposed to go to the Olympics, but got drafted in World War II in the Navy
Right.
because they needed people for the war. So he had to go. So he was not able to do, but he was actually scheduled to go to the Olympics. Real stuff. So that was Brett's dad. Brett comes from many brothers and sisters. Looking about 12 children.
Woo. It's 12 of them?
12, yeah.
Woo.
So and Brett and Owen, well, Diana and Owen were the youngest two. Then Brett was, I think, the third youngest.
Okay.
And I've talked about Diana Hart.
Yeah.
I'll leave that there.
I already know.
Yeah, what a lady. But um, but Brett, he's a guy that came from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. In the late 70s, his father had sold Stampede Wrestling to Vince McMahon, and Vince McMahon had taken the wrestlers to the WWF. And Brett was a single star at the beginning, but they really didn't know what to do with him because Brett was kind of quiet. He was kind of shy, and he really wasn't, a forefront runner with talking and everything. So they ended up placing him with his brother-in-law, Jim the Anvil Neidhart. Now, Jim the Anvil married Brett's sister, Ellie Hart. That's how that happened. And he was known as the Anvil. I'm going to share some with you guys real quick. He was known as the Anvil because he was a Guinness World Book of Records Olympic anvil thrower. He used to pick up actual anvils and throw them.
Oh,
And he was also an Oakland Raider.
Bret the Hitman Hart?
No, Jim the Anvil, his
Oh,
brother-in-law.
yeah.
Jim the Anvil. Yeah, he was a professional anvil
Yeah,
thrower,
I got you. Yeah.
track star, and he was an Oakland Raider at one time.
Okay.
So yeah, anvil was a heavy deal. So they put them together, and that's how you got the original Hart Foundation.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
they wrestled together in tag for many years. So you're looking from the 80s up until Bret went single, probably by 1993. So that was a lot of years of him doing that. And Bret, never thought that he would be a singles wrestler again. He was. He never thought he would get a title. He got the Intercontinental title fighting against Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig. He never thought he'd be heavyweight champion. His first heavyweight championship, he won from the legendary Nature Boy, Ric Flair.
Rick.
That was his first title shot, which
Not
he
twirly
won.
Rick. Not twirly Rick.
Ric Flair, high flying limousine riding. Yeah, he won it from Ric Flair.
Wow.
So the tragedy with Bret was that, everybody knows about the Montreal screw job, where Vince McMahon screwed Bret out of his title when he was leaving to go from WWF to WCW. That was the first thing. And that was televised, it was done in Montreal, Canada, was televised. Very embarrassing moment. Bret spit in Vince's face. And when they went to the shower area, which Vince came in, Bret told him, hey, you've got till I get out of the shower. And if you're still here when I get out of the shower, I'm knocking you out.
Right.
And it happened. Vince had a big black eye. he nailed him. And the way it was told was Bret saw him. Bret got dressed, put on his jeans, his sneakers, everything. Vince was still sitting there. He's like, okay. Nailed him. Vince took it because he said, I owe him one because I did screw him over in that. So Bret went to WCW and wrestled there. And the thing about it was when he had rebuilt the Hart Foundation before he left WWF, it was now all his relatives together in a team. Because at that time in WWF, they had built a lot of teams. So like you had D-Generation X, which was Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and Chyna at the time. And Rick Rude was kind of hanging around the group a little bit. Not for long, but he was there briefly. You had the Nation of Domination, which was The Rock, Ron Simmons, D'Lo Brown, Mark Henry, and The Godfather.
Right.
Yeah, that was their group. And then you had the Hart Foundation team, which was Bret Hart, his younger brother Owen, the British Bulldog, his brother-in-law that was married to Diana.
British Bulldogs. Yep, I remember
that. And you had Jim the Anvil Neidhart, and you had Flying Brian Pillman. And Pillman, the loose cannon, was brought into the Hart family, trained with Stu Hart, and was considered to be like a family member.
Right.
Of the family. So Pillman had died a little bit before Bret had left, due to an enlarged heart, which came from steroids. You know. And so Bret, had lost one family member. He had passed away. So when Bret had gone to WCW, that's when Owen had gotten killed, his younger brother. He was 80 feet on a ceiling because they were negligent with booking this whole stunt, and Owen fell to his death. He landed in the wrestling ring, and he was telling people to look out as he was falling to his death because he didn't want anybody to get hurt, and that's how good of a dude Owen was.
Wow. They had that on the internet, didn't they, when he had that fall?
People put videos up at the time. Yeah, it was a pay-per-view.
Yeah, it was a pay-per-view.
And so we were watching the pay-per-view, and you kind of saw it, and then it, they had to cut it. Yeah. And then they came back and announced that he had died from that stunt from the ring, 80 feet.
I remember that, bro.
And Bret had really, it had really done something to Bret because it just wasn't Bret's brother. they were the closest too. Owen and Bret were super, super close to each other.
Right.
And, you know, as a matter of fact, when the screw job happened, Owen was the one that came in the ring and said, Bret, don't worry about it. It's not worth it. It's don't, you know, he really comforted him and talked to him.
Right.
And Bret always felt guilty because he said, if I had stayed maybe with the WWF, I know I probably could have talked Owen out of doing that. You know,
Right.
I could have talked to Vince to prevent that whole thing. Cause as soon as I saw what they were going to do, I'd have been like, heck no,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Sure.
And so that was the one tragedy. The other tragedy he had was British Bulldog, which was his brother-in-law, Davy Boy Smith. Davy Boy died of an enlarged heart.
Steroids, bro. I'm telling you, that it's rampant. It was rampant.
Yeah, and that was the next one for Bret. And then I believe it was Kurt Hennig was next, Mr. Perfect, who was actually Bret's best friend, and he died enlarged heart.
Same. I mean, 1+1 = 2. Everywhere.
So he's down. He's down 3. Rick Rude died, who was another close friend of his.
Rick Rude. Yep, ravishing Rick Rude.
I'm pretty sure he had an enlarged heart too.
I mean, Rick Rude was one of the most shredded. I mean,
Yeah.
he was so shredded. I mean, it was anabolic steroids, bro.
He had that happen. And you know, the thing about it was then the Benoit incident came up.
Yeah.
And you know, Benoit had trained in the dungeon, was close with the family, considered to be family, and that whole murder situation happened, and that lowered a lot for him. And then he had an injury from Bill Goldberg where he was kicked.
Talking about Benoit?
Goldberg.
No, you talking about Benoit had an injury though?
No, well, Bret Hart got an injury.
Okay, I'm making sure I heard you say. Okay.
Bret had gotten an injury
so yeah.
from Goldberg that gave him a serious concussion, and later on, that ended up going to a stroke. And when the stroke hit, his wrestling career was over. They said, "You're never going to be able to wrestle again."
You saying that the stroke was because of what Goldberg did to him?
Yeah, he kicked him full blast in the face, and over time, it shifted and turned into a stroke. And he was riding like a 10-speed bike, and the stroke happened when he was riding the 10-speed bike, and he crashed the bike. And you know, they found him, and he lost his ability to walk and kind of talk, and
was Bret a victim to the drug usage that went on in that time frame in professional wrestling?
No, he only took steroids a little bit, and I believe it was for a recovery. And he may have taken a little bit more over the time, but he really didn't mess with a lot of stuff.
I could tell his body was. I could tell he wasn't. Yeah. He didn't have the steroid type look.
No, he didn't.
Which you can, if you can see it a mile away.
Right.
People are telling, I'm not on no steroid. You're on more juice than Orange Juice Johnson or somebody. I don't know. You know, Orange Juice Jones, whoever you're the singer.
No, that's the thing. But the thing about Bret's career at WCW was that he got paid more money than he had ever seen. But because he got hurt, at the time he got hurt, they were not going to honor the rest of his contract. They only honored a very small portion. I believe he was supposed to end up with between 15 to 12. No. I think he was supposed to get 8 to 10 million.
They never offered him a piece. Like, to me, it seemed like Vince McMahon was kind of greedy.
Well, that's why he left that was part of the reason why he left WWF, was because they couldn't afford to pay Bret what he had asked for. I think Bret was making close to $1 million. He was making close to $1 million a year, right? And at the time, Vince was not the top company, WCW. was the top
At the
company.
time, yeah, yeah.
And Ted Turner owns WCW straight out. So he was able to negotiate
I
these
remember
big
Ted Turner
contracts.
production, a Ted Turner production. Yeah,
Ted Turner could pay people crazy money.
right,
That's what happened was he stole Hogan and Macho and everybody from Vince because he was willing to pay them, 15, $20 million, stuff like that, to go to his company.
yeah,
When they were getting maybe a million or two, if that, a year, right? And
right,
he's all, oh, man, I'll give you 20 million a
right,
year. So where are they going to go? So everybody was jumping ship going to WCW because WCW, and you could, in your contract clause, you could renegotiate your contract, but
right.
you could do it. And here's the thing. This is where it gets tricky. They wanted Nash and Hall, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall wanted Bret to come. And then when Bret came, they wanted to know how much Bret was getting a year. Because then they could renegotiate their contract right there
Oh, yeah. So
and ask for more.
they were doing those bathroom stall contracts.
Yes, they could. It was in the clause in the contract. They could do that. So they'd be like, yeah, come on over. How much they offer you? 10 million a year. Oh, okay. Well, I want 12. Renegotiate right now, and then they could do that. And a lot of times they got it.
Right.
So I think Bret said he got $1.5 million or $1 million out of that deal, out of the time before the stroke happened.
Right.
So he didn't even get to fulfill all that stuff that he was supposed to get the bigger, the bigger money.
Clauses about injuries.
I think there was a clause for injury.
Probably, yeah. I'm pretty sure.
So they ended up doing that deal. So, and by that time, his marriage was on the rocks. So that was ending, the first marriage to Julie Hart. So that was ending. The Benoit situation happened by 04, 05. And he had, he was in the biggest wrestling scandal in history, which was the Montreal Screwjob I mentioned earlier. He had signed the contract with WCW. They didn't really use him correctly because the first thing everyone was thinking was he was going to have all these matches with Hulk Hogan, evil Hulk Hogan, Hollywood Hulk Hogan. So, and he was going to do a lot of stuff there when they got him there, and they really didn't use him in that way. Then he lost all the money, ended up with the stroke, was losing everything. Stu Hart, his father, eventually died. His mother died. I would credit the death of his mother and father from the death of Owen,
right,
his younger brother, when I don't think they could handle that. And I think it just killed them a lot sooner. They were up there in age, but it really just kind of just peeled that over.
It seems like it's such an ominous cloud over professional wrestling when you dig deep into it, right? Now we're talking about Bret, but I didn't hear much scandal about Bret, but we're talking about a time where everybody wasn't privy to news. Like we have social media, we have all type of news channels and things like that where we can get the information that we're looking for. But
no, absolutely.
Yeah, with Bret is more like he had a hard one, bro. I mean, with the death situation, with the health situation. My thing is that did he ever really? Because I know there had to be drug addictions with those injuries. Probably, probably medical. I mean, prescription drugs. That was never at that time considered an addiction if the doctor gave it to you. But then you got people falsifying prescriptions. Instead of getting one, they go to different pharmacies and getting more and more.
Yeah.
Bret
was pretty good about that. He had a little bit of an issue, but not a major issue. He really didn't have a lot of a scandal, going on with him. I think Bret's thing was his image meant everything to him in a lot of ways. Being seen as a wrestler that took his job seriously was very important to him. So he always kept that with him wherever he went, and Bret had such pride. I mean, he and Wayne Gretzky are the two most famous Canadians in Canada. I mean, when you went to Canada, Bret Hart was like at the level Hulk Hogan was in the United States.
Right.
That's what Bret was like in Canada.
Yeah. Yeah.
He has like events that they have. He has Bret Hart Day, Bret Hart Holiday in Canada. He has Bret Hart Cancer Awareness. He's had cancer, I believe, 2 to 3 times.
So, and you told me an interesting story about the uniform.
The pinky black?
Yeah, they talk about how because when I first saw it, I'm like, you got to understand, this was the time where we called everything. If it wasn't right, we was calling it kind of, that don't look right. Can't wear too much pink. No, but now that they associated that particular color with a noble cause, breast cancer awareness.
Yeah. So, and that was Bret's color before they really had the pink for breast care awareness.
Right.
And people, guys were wearing pink. Bret was the first one. Bret and Anvil, they were the first ones that wore pink. And he made pink masculine.
Right.
Bret was a very masculine man. He's the excellence of execution. The best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. That's his saying.
Yeah.
He was that. So Canada's favorite son, Bret Hart. And I remember they did the Stampede match in Canada, in Calgary, and it was the Hart Foundation versus Ken Shamrock, the Legion of Doom, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and Goldust.
Goldust, yeah.
And which is the son of legendary wrestler Dusty Rhodes. So they fought them, and I believe there was over, what was it, 100,000, 800,000 in that arena for the Hart family. And they said they cheered so hard for them, the arena shook. That's what everybody said. Like everything was shaking. And at the end of the match, they had every member of the Hart family come in the ring. All the kids, all the grandkids, all the cousins, and it filled the entire ring because there were so many of them.
Wow.
And they were loved, and still to this day loved in Canada. As a matter of fact, there's a Stu Hart after Bret's dad, Stu Hart Street in Canada.
Wow.
And Bret is loved everywhere to this day. They still have the Bret Hart holiday. They still have the Cancer Awareness Bret Hart Day.
Yeah.
He's played Santa Claus.
Yeah.
And plays and everything like that. They have him come. He's a national treasure. He and Wayne Gretzky are the two. And of course, Bret's father. So, I mean, you have to think, like, even with all of that and the love that Canada has for Bret, the loss that he had, he was married 3 times. His third marriage, he's still married to the young lady. I believe I think she's 15 years younger than Bret. So he did that. He married her.
Bret got a little R. Kelly in him.
No, he didn't get her young. He got her older, so he's all right.
I know.
So
yeah,
he, and he's found peace. He was able to start walking and talking again, moving around normal. He can't chance wrestling anymore.
No.
But the thing is, he's still alive. He's still doing well. He's still encouraging people. Guys like myself, Bret had a huge impact on my life, and when I saw him go through those trials and difficulties and loss, I think he responded to it very well. And he rose to the occasion. He didn't let it bury him.
Yeah.
He rose to it. And Bret has been a symbol for every person, wrestling fan, or up and coming young wrestler. There's not an up and coming young wrestler that is not a Bret Hart fan. You know, like Bret Hart is loved and respected by everybody, and for the right reasons.
Right.
You know, he has earned that respect with hard blood, sweat, and tears in his career. And he carried that. And that's what I loved about Bret was that he respected children. He
Yeah.
wanted to be a hero for kids.
That's a
That's why when he would go out to the wrestling ring, he had those sunglasses, right? He would before he got in the ring, he would take the sunglasses off and he would select a random kid,
put them on. Yeah, give them the
put
glass.
them on,
Right.
give
Yeah.
him a high five, say hey. He did that every show he did. He always gave that respect. And he had a commercial where he let the parents know, I'm Bret the Hitman Hart. Now, when your kids are watching me, they're going to be safe. I'm going to make sure that I handle myself in that respect and in that regard. And that was very important to him
Yeah.
to be seen in that light and to always keep that. And that's what I always respected about Bret was that he was a hero that you could definitely look up to. And that was always important for him to be seen in that light. So he stayed away from a lot of things because he knew that his image was that important to him.
Right.
And it was like, like they say, a good name means a great many things, right?
Yes.
Bret took that seriously, where it was like a good name meant a great many of things.
Right.
When a lot of the guys didn't necessarily care about that.
Yeah.
How would I put
had
that
no
respectfully?
morals, sound like it. A lot of them from the research we've been doing, I've been looking into, and a lot of them was about having a good old time.
Yeah. Bret really tried to stay away from a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, I'm still tripping off Ric Flair on the plane, bro.